Greetings, travelers! Today we're visiting the Chicago City Boat Tour, one of the most iconic attractions that you need to do on your next visit to the City of Winds.
Became architecture from Spain. And so the clock tower that you're seeing here is actually modeled after the Torre de Bell Tower of the Cathedral de Sevilla in Spain. And on the building's exterior are a grand total of right around 250,000 terracotta clay tiles. Now, terracotta was a common material used for that time. One advantage of terracotta tiles is that it's a much more fireproof material than a lot of buildings that came before this one. If you know anything about the Great Chicago Fire, that's very important, and we'll be discussing that incident a little bit later on in the tour. But the disadvantage of something like terracotta is that it's a very fragile material. Something like porcelain is a good comparison. And that means that you have problems with these tiles breaking from time to time. Now that means that anytime a terracotta clad building in Chicago needs to be washed, it actually has to be done so very carefully by hand. Which means for the Wrigley building, and many like it, you'll see people suspended up there from time to time using these soft bristle brushes and a soapy misting system, very carefully spraying down and then washing it by hand, keeping it nice and clean. Now, as we continue on, we're going to see the second tallest skyscraper in Chicago, just in front of us here. This is known as Trump International Hotel and Tower. It stands at 1,388 feet tall. Now, Trump Tower is a great example of a style known as contextualism. That was a style that was popularized during the 1980s, although the building here was not completed until 2009. But contextualism is all about complementing your surroundings through the architecture. We can actually observe how Trump Tower accomplishes this. It has these 3 setback patios, and each one is designed to match the height of surrounding buildings in this area. For example, we can see the first setback roughly matches the height of this section of the Wrigley building right there. And then the left-hand side, we just have to look across the river, and you can see plenty of other buildings matching that second height. And then the top right-hand side, the last setback matches the height of A&A Plaza. And we can't see that one right now, but it's going to be coming up just behind Trump Tower here in a moment. It's this black box building just behind it. Now, Trump Tower was designed by an architect named Adrian Smith. I like to call Adrian Smith the world's tallest architect, even though he himself is only about 5'7". But here is how he gets his nickname. He designed a lot of tall skyscrapers, Trump Tower being one of them. But this is actually pales in comparison to his greatest accomplishment so far, that being the Burj Khalifa located in Dubai. He designed that one, and that is currently the tallest skyscraper in the world. That one stands at just about 2,717 feet tall, roughly double the size of Trump Tower, and that is a very tall skyscraper, and that's how he gets his nickname. He's also responsible for Jeddah Tower. That one's currently under construction in Saudi Arabia. When it's complete, it's going to rise in the air over 3,000 feet tall. Now, as we continue, coming up to our right-hand side, there's what a lot of tourists in Chicago like to call the corn cob buildings due to their unique shape. This is a very iconic pair of towers right here. You might recognize it from album covers or movies. This is known as Marina City. Now, Marina City was completed in 1964. It's a product of the 1960s, product of its time, really, because during the 1960s, this was a very industrial downtown area. Steel, iron mills, distilleries, breweries, an industrial serving river, and in general, it was not very desirable to live down here. Now, to change this status quo, an architect named Bertrand Goldberg designed these. Its whole purpose was to be a city within a city, was the pitch. Basically, you take all the amenities, put them within or very close to Marina City here, so people don't have to walk very far to meet their basic needs. Included when it was first completed here was things like grocery stores and shopping centers. You also have a restaurant right here facing the water, a lovely marina for your boat or your yacht, and then valet parking for your car at the base of each one of the towers. Now, when it was first completed at the top of the tower, there was an ice skating rink. There is still a bowling alley fully operational here today, as well as a movie theater, which has now gone through renovations. It was turned into the iconic House of Blues just around the corner here. Now, from this angle, you may see corn cobs, but the intention behind this design was to place 2 sunflowers side by side along the water, and you can really see that if you're looking down at Marina City from a bird's eye view. Either way, Bertrand Goldberg was trying to complement and capture that essence of nature with the architecture. All right, and here to the left-hand side, we have this white granite building. You can follow this pattern all the way up to the top, where you can notice how the roof of the building itself is shaped like a Greek temple or the Parthenon. A lot of people like to call this building the Parthenon on steroids. This is 77 West Wacker. Now, it's designed by an architect named Ricardo Bofill from Spain. He's actually our only international architect whose buildings we get to check out along the water, so I always like to give him a shout out. Now, this style is known as Neoclassical architecture. That means you have these older and newer motifs combined with construction, white granite and reflective glass, but then also that great temple shape at the top. Now, if we jump back to the right-hand side, this red brick building coming up, that's the Reed Murdoch Center. That was fully completed in 1914, being used as a grocery store warehouse for the Reed Murdoch Company. Now, there's not too much fancy stuff going on with its construction. It looks pretty plain, pretty simple. But if you look a little closer here, one to the right of the clock tower, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sets of those bay windows. Now, you're probably thinking there's 6 on the other side as well, but let's count them. One to the left of the clock tower. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The building is asymmetrical. It's uneven. That's weird. What's going on? Well, it was symmetrical up until around 1926 when Chicago started to expand and widen this street in front of us, LaSalle Street. By 1928, it was fully completed and that was expanded, but then they found out that the street was going to run into the end of this building, so they commanded the Reed Murdoch Company to shave off a set of their windows off the side, and they complied so that their building could stay here without the possibility of being demolished. Now here to the left is the opposite of that. This is the builder's building. And this is a good example of expanding or taking advantage of this extra space at the end. And this building was actually broken up into 2 individual sections here, roughly 60 years apart within the 2 designs here. You have 1927 on the left-hand side when it was completed, the builder's building from 1927, designed by Grant Anderson, Probst and White. And then this expansion was not added until right around the end of 1986. And 2 different architecture firms as well. Like I said, Graham Anderson, Probst and White on the left-hand side, and that expansion by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. Now, they were trying to complement the architecture that you see there on the left, but it's not a carbon copy. They still want to have this modern there. We got one of our L trains passing above. I can't see it from here. It's either the brown or purple train feeding down the loop. In case you didn't know, L trains, elevated trains, the loop, because the trains make a big loop around downtown. Now here to the right is a very popular style in Chicago. This is known as Art Deco architecture, and this is known as the Merchandise Mart. Now, the Merchandise Mart was completed in 1930, being used as a furniture warehouse and showrooms for Marshall Field and Company. And actually, if you take a look in front of the building itself, you can see these. I like to call them the big Pez dispensers. That's what they look like to me. Those are large bronze busts of the heads of what is the royalty or princes of retail, honoring major retail icons such as Marshall Field. Now, if you take a look at the building itself, you have these deep inset windows, polished Indiana limestone for the material. You have these metallic accents all around, and then these pinstripe columns elongating the building, making it look even larger than it already is, although it is quite large, about 4.2 million square feet of total space, in fact. But yes, the whole idea with Art Deco is to capture that essence of magnitude and luxury, right? These grand palace-like Art Deco structures. And it tells you when Art Deco was popular, the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties, which was a time of prosperity in America until the end of the decade when everything changed in 1929. All right, as we continue, we are now in Wolf Point. Now, oftentimes I like to call this the modern-day trophy case of Chicago because all around you here is a lot of contemporary architecture. And what that means is that a lot of these buildings were completed just within the last 5 to 10 years. And before that, it was mostly just parking lots in this area. Now, the most recent addition to Wolf Point is here slightly to our right. This is Salesforce Tower, just completed last year in 2023. Looks like we got some scaffolding or some window washers at the top there. That's fun to check out. Now, to either side of it, you have Wolf Point East and West. Those are luxury condominiums and apartments. And if you look to the left of all of that, just in front of us is River Point Tower from 2016, or as I like to call it, the Hot Pocket Building, because I think this one looks like a big Hot Pocket container. Or some people see the apple pie for McDonald's, either way. Now, if you look in front of that building here, you can also see there's this red spiral sculpture hanging out. That is known as the Constellation. It is a sculpture designed by an architect named Santiago Calatrava. Now, he's another architect from Spain who was supposed to have a building in Chicago. And if it was fully completed, it was going to be absolutely magnificent. A residential structure known as the Chicago Spire. It was going to stand at 2,000 feet tall and was going to be the tallest building in North America. Now that was canceled in 2008 due to the recession and financial crisis, so we never got it, and for a long time there was a hole in the ground of where the Chicago Spire was supposed to be, where they broke ground for the project. But no, we only got this by Santiago Calatrava in Chicago. It is not very tall, and it's not a building, but hey, it's better than nothing, right? Now as we take a right-hand turn here, we're going to start heading up the North Branch. Now this is going to be a quicker trip up this way than down the South Branch later on. But a couple things to check out here. First off, this bridge that's pulled up right there. That's the Carroll Avenue Railroad Bridge, also sometimes referred to as the Kinsey Street Bridge, as that's the street that's next to it nowadays. But it used to be an old industrial railroad bridge, no longer in operation. It was completed in 1908 and made a Chicago landmark in 2007. Anything that is a Chicago landmark means it's going to stay there for a good long time to come, and it will not be torn down, and this will not be torn down. Now this bridge is actually still fully operational, but the only time we see it open up or down is when they need to perform maintenance on the bridge, and that happens less than once per year. Now across from it here is the Fulton House, the pink building, and that's actually the oldest building we'll be checking out on the tour today. It was completed back in 1898. It's been there for a good long time. Although it did not always look like this, because originally there were no windows and no balconies. It was simply a giant pink freezer box. A dry storage freezer warehouse for the meatpacking industry. From the late 1860s until the 1920s, Chicago was the meatpacking capital of the United States. And so we have stockyards throughout this area. Butchering the meat, you need a place to store it, throw it inside a freezer box like this before shipping it out around the U.S. Until the building went through a renovation in the 1980s to turn this into apartment complex and condominiums. Now just next to it here, take a look. You got these triangle shapes on the roof, and if you saw, it's actually a triangle shape of the roof itself. Harry Reese is the architect. He has a lot of triangle buildings in Chicago, including the Chicago Correctional Institute, which is shaped like a triangle with slit-hole windows, as well as the Swiss Hotel, which is shaped like a box of Toblerone chocolates on the main branch of the river. Now with these townhomes here, you have these patios and balconies that are facing the water. That is notable due to when these were constructed, 1988. During the 1980s, it was uncommon to have any architecture facing the river, because in the 1980s, the river was still kind of smelly and gross. We really had not invested into fully cleaning it up. We were starting to, at least. But then this was much more common to see during the 1980s. Now this is the East Bank Club. This is a building with its back facing the water. And this is from the early 80s as opposed to the late 80s with the river cottages there. But you have this backside of the building facing away from the river, really reflects the attitude at the time. But then if you fast forward in time to the late 90s and early 2000s, then we start to see these pop up. These are the Kinsey Park townhomes. Modern day townhomes with some beautiful patios, balconies, trees, flower beds, and sidewalks, all facing and embracing what the river has to offer. And it really goes to show a good visual example of how much has changed as the quality of the Chicago River has changed and improved over time. Now we are on to our very first break here. It's not going to be for too long. Captain Rob's going to turn the boat around. We're going to start heading down in the opposite direction here in just a moment. Like I said, plenty more to see in that direction. For now, I'm going to take a quick walk around the boat just in case you have any quick questions. If you want to step out of the sun or grab yourself a drink, downstairs is open there for you, as well as our restrooms, and we'll be right back.
If you want to check out this amazing tour and experience what it has to offer, it has the cost of $49 with 95 cents per adult and $26 with 95 cents per child. With that being said, I hope this video was insightful. Thank you for watching, and let's keep exploring the world one trip at a time.